solid and so strong, you could not tell that there was any sort of list aboard Titanic unless you were the most observant passenger or a crew member. All these first-class women didn't want to leave their husbands on this warm rock, essentially, for this dingy craft, which would be lowered over the edge up to 70 feet to the water to this black abyss.
People thought this was a folly. They were going to get into a lifeboat, be cranked down, and then a couple hours later, they were going to have to go through this in reverse. They'd get back on. They thought it was not necessary. The ship was unsinkable.
At 12:45 a.m., over an hour after striking the iceberg, Titanic launches her first lifeboat. But it's less than half filled.
That lifeboat, which had space for 65 passengers, probably even 70 passengers, fully loaded, it left the ship with around 27 people aboard because they couldn't find passengers willing to get aboard the lifeboat.
If only they had practiced that morning as originally planned.
The cancellation of the evacuation drill was so terrible because many of the crew therefore had no idea of the most basic fundamental aspects of managing an evacuation. They had to ask, does anybody know how to man a boat? Does anybody know how to cut, these strings? Can anybody help us?
In retrospect, that decision cost one life.
Yes, I went to the Titanic exhibit in Calgary Planetarium twice. Once with my kids and once with my girlfriend.
Deep in the bowels of the ship,
that iceberg was cold. I felt like I was there. I touched the actual parts of the Titanic.
There was no public service announcement system. There was no PA system.
This would have been
Titanic, so people weren't aware
2011.
of what was happening.
But 18-year-old Leah Axe hears something amiss and heads to the deck with her baby son to investigate.
My great-grandmother went up to the crewman and she said, "We heard that the ship hit something. Is there any danger?" And he said, "Oh, absolutely not. Go back to bed."
Yeah, fake news
the crew
again.
Are keeping third-class passengers in the dark.
They're not told.
Oh, people get left in the dark all the
To
time.
the top decks, the lifeboats. They're just told
Including me.
to make sure to keep the third-class passengers in their areas. So they push the third-class passengers who know that something's wrong down and back into their deck.
But
Poor
then
third
Leah
class.
realizes the crew is lying to her.
My great-grandmother saw something that really made her blood run cold.
You know how many lies are out
And
there?
that was that she
Who's
saw a
lying
lifeboat
to
in the
you?
water,
I know who's
70
lying
feet
to
below.
me.
As the ocean continues
I don't
pouring
lie.
into Titanic's side,
I wouldn't be able
She
to
begins
sleep
to
at night
list.
if I did.
this creates new challenges for crew furiously trying to load passengers into lifeboats.
The
Yeah.
lifeboats on that
Subdue
side
the panic.
were hanging farther away from the side of the
That's
ship.
why the government
making it
doesn't disclose any
more
UAP
difficult, more
events.
perilous. So instead of stepping from the deck just simply into a lifeboat, they had to basically leap because now the lifeboats are a meter away from the deck.
You can leap a meter.
Women's clothing during this time period only adds to the difficulty.
But one of
Crazy
the guards
clothing.
the day was very tight-fitting skirt, and you had to shuffle around. So
Oh,
they
ridiculous.
literally could not pick up their feet and move their legs in a way that would allow them to even get into a boat.
It's not like they're wearing Lululemons, things that are easy for them to move around in. They're wearing clothes
Hey,
that were not
Jen,
suitable for doing
I'm wearing your
physical activity.
Lululemons. I'm wearing your
They weren't 7
Lululemons
feet over
that
the
you
water.
bought for me
Looking down
before you
and
died at
having
the age of
to
46.
jump for your life into a lifeboat was very terrifying. And
Jennifer
some
bought
people
me a
literally
lot of
could not
things.
make themselves jump over the chasm.
Including that stereo.
Desperate to fill the boats, the
Ah.
crew takes matters into their own hands.
She didn't die of
Were not willing to
alcohol
leave.
and
They would
pills.
rip them out of the
She
arms
died of
their
loneliness.
husbands with just the
She
husband
died
body
of loneliness
and toss them into the
at
lifeboats.
46.
as the night progresses, it's
'Cause her kids didn't talk to her.
There's something
Let that be a
wrong.
lesson
And
for
as you know,
everybody.
panic can spread rather
I
quickly.
tried to
The mood
encourage her
changes
2
very,
children
very
to
rapidly.
phone her. They said, no, she keeps screwing up.
Panic sets in among the passengers.
Well, all I did was try and
dark
help,
secret
and look what it
emerges.
got me.
Your
Nothing
chance
but
of survival
persecution.
depends on your class.
Well, no, people just talk. People talk about things. People want to point fingers, but guess what? How many fingers you got pointing back at you when you point a finger, huh?
Who are en route home
Tell
to
me.
Haiti with their 2 young daughters, desperately
I haven't
try
done
to board a
anything.
lifeboat.
That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you do nothing wrong. You get blamed for shit you wouldn't believe.
If I were Juliet and I had 2 small children and I was
I want you all to
the
be
pushing,
reincarnated as a
shoving
male.
motion,
He's
Joseph
got
and
no
Juliet
job.
are each holding
Even
a
though he's got
daughter,
3
and
diplomas
they're
and he's
trying
tried
so
hundreds of
hard
times to find
stay
work.
together.
You go through my life and
Juliet
see what
soon
it's
boards
about.
a boat
Put your
with her girls.
feet in my moccasins.
But Joseph
Now look at
isn't
these
granted
people.
passage.
They're dead. No, I took a ticket, and you were a passenger, and it told you at the end of the
And
tour if
before the
you were
lifeboat,
alive or not.
Plunges to the sea. She sees Joseph off in the
I was a
distance,
doctor
and
that
she
died.
is calling to him, Joseph, Joseph, and finally he sees her. The boat plunges into the sea, and Joseph is calling out to Juliet, saying, "Take care of our girls. It will be okay. It will be okay. I will see you soon." And she believed him. But that is the last and final moment in which they see each other.
Wow. Unusual to see
At lifeboat number 8, Ida and Isidore Strauss,
Someone
the owners
of
of Macy's department
his
store,
color
faced their own
to
painful
go
goodbye.
to America. They didn't.
Crew members usher Ida into a seat while her
They
husband
must have been
Isidore
pretty smart.
watches. Then, fate intervenes.
The 3rd officer turned to my great-grandfather and said, "Sir, you're an elderly gentleman. We all know who you are. We would like to, of course, have you enter a lifeboat."
Huh. Oh, men could be
And
saved.
My great-grandfather said, "No,
What?
I will not enter a lifeboat until I see that every woman and child on this ship is in a lifeboat before me."
Wow.
At that point, my great-grandmother exited her space on the lifeboat, joined her husband,
What?
wrapped her arms around him, and said, "If you are going to die on board, I will die with you."
Wow. Now that's
Many people overheard them. In fact, my
That's
great-grandmother
commitment.
actually mentioned seeing the Strausses together and how that story moved her, of how she stuck by her husband's side.
The Strausses go down with the ship. Together.
I ain't going down with the ship yet, Jen.
17-year-old Jack Thayer
Stay over
is
my
also on
shoulders.
deck with
I
his
need your
parents
help.
And his mother's maid, helping to get the women into a lifeboat.
Oh God.
Everything got very hurried. And people started to be pushing and shoving.
It's more dangerous walking out front of my front door here in Kamloops. Homeless people,
And Jack thinks
people in
how we would
crime,
go off this
and
boat.
we're in the crime capital of Canada.
Passengers are quickly realizing their survival
I
may
felt
be
safer in
dependent upon
Indonesia.
where they are on the boat. Deep in the bowels of third class, Fong Long, one of 8 Chinese men on board the Titanic, realizes he's in trouble.
My father put his foot down on the floor and he noticed his foot was at a different angle. So that's when he knew the ship was actually tipping.
Listing.
I think when the water was going across their feet, they knew something wasn't right. So I think they took their own initiatives to escape.
Easier said than done.
The ship is not laid out in a way for a third-class passenger to immediately be able
It's
to just
funny,
see a door that says
they labeled this
lifeboats, evacuation
The
distress.
unsinkable ship. Unsinkable.
18-year-old
And that's
Leah
the one that
Axe
sank.
is also desperately trying to escape with her 10-month-old son, Frank.
My great-grandmother is with hundreds of people. with no way.
See, this
to
is
get
the
to
truth.
lifeboats.
You know, I even took my
What?
2 daughters to see
A
Titanic in 3D at the West Edmonton Mall. And you felt like you were there. You felt like you were at the top of the ship when it was going down. That was in 3D IMAX.
Out of the corner of her eye,
My mom
she
stayed
saw
home
him
and
being
I just
thrown.
took my 2 daughters there.
To her,
That
it
was an
looked like he was
amazing
being thrown
experience.
overboard.
I felt like I was on the
But
Titanic in
what she didn't
3D.
know
I've
is
touched the
that ship was
Titanic,
listing.
different
And the only way
pieces
to
of
get
it,
people into
and
the lifeboats
you
was
went
to
in and out of
basically
these
throw
rooms
them
at
in
the
there.
Calgary Planetarium back in
She is
2011.
hysterical.
And then at the end, you got a chance to
Eventually,
feel how
gets
cold that
shoved
water
into a
was.
different lifeboat.
Colder than 0
And now
because seawater
she's convinced he's
freezes
dead,
at
and that a
minus
crazy
3.
person grabbed him and threw him overboard into the ocean.
The situation gets more desperate by the minute. In
Yeah.
the radio room, the wireless operators continue sending out distress signals.
Harold Bride and Jack Phillips sat there madly tapping away these messages to anyone and everyone who would listen to them.
Soon, the RMS Carpathia, a British steamship
Actually, that
located
wouldn't be
nearly
a bad
60
way to
miles
go.
away, picks up their call.
People are trying to destroy
It
me.
immediately begins steaming toward the sinking
Jaden
ship.
never liked Lori, so that's why I took Lori to that exhibit on my own. Jaden
Over
didn't like
2 hours
Lori.
after striking the iceberg,
But then she said,
First
"Oh, Lori, I
Officer
love
Murdoch and other
you."
members of the crew load the final
It
lifeboat.
was my ex-wife that didn't like her and wanted to have my relationships destroyed.
Then, at 2:17
And
a.m.,
my money and everything.
Titanic's Captain
Well,
John Smith
you don't pay
declares,
child support for a 23-year-old daughter studying psychology. You don't do that.
every man for
When I was
himself.
18, I worked 2 jobs and didn't have any support.
The steel behemoth can no longer
I-
hold the ocean.
I
at
feel
bay.
like I'm sinking. There's an allegory for it.
Jack talks about this incredible noise now. The boilers are meeting with the water.
Yeah, I know, life
It's a
isn't fair,
hissing
but
sound.
that's why men die young.
It's the sound of metal on metal. It's the sound of this
Men
technology
die
all
young.
breaking up around them.
When
He says the sound was
when
quite
third
unbearable.
class is pushed
The
down
water
underground,
overcame the engine rooms, and
you
they were no
can't
longer
win.
able to keep the generators running.
Shortly thereafter, the great liner loses all power. Its 10,000 light bulbs go dark.
when you got money, you can do anything. Right, Julies?
The ship suddenly went black. I've been in black ships. When you're on the interior,
I got
you're
3
lost.
diplomas
You
and I
see your
can't
hand
find
in front of
work.
your face. You're
Who
in a
wants to
strange
hire a
environment, so you don't know how
61-year-old
to
with
get out. You
3
don't know where the
diplomas?
stairway is, where the doorway is.
Nobody. They hire
So even if he was
immigrants.
still inside the ship, it must have been
8-13, char punch, chest. 8-13, char punch, chest set at no das.
Darkness.
That's Hindi.
Just nothing. All you'd be able to hear was the screams of other people.
On deck, the remaining passengers and crew begin.
I gotta
preparing
learn
for the
different
inevitable.
languages to learn how to live in
A
Canada.
plunge into the Atlantic's 28-degree waters.
28 degrees.
Titanic was death in slow motion. Everyone knew for that last
Because
hour
it's
or more
saline.
that they were
It's
gonna
saline.
die,
28 degrees.
especially
It's still
the third class when they get
not
up on deck.
frozen like
People were
ice.
throwing a lot
28
of
degrees.
debris overboard, especially.
I know, I felt it.
toward the end. Many people were throwing deck chairs or whatever they could find so that people would be able to cling on to something when they hit the water.
There must have been this moment where they realized, you know what? The ships aren't here yet. There's no rescue that's going to make it in time.
When you got no
And
cloud cover,
this
that's when
angle
it's
is getting
coldest.
pretty
There's no
steep and
insulating
the ship's
layer.
gonna go down. And it must have been incredible panic. And then those last few minutes where everybody was just trying to
for
rush
anybody.
towards the stern of the ship as fast as possible, just to get away from the part of the boat that was sinking. People were sliding down the decks into the water. All of a sudden, there's this realization that, you know, we're not going to make it.
Yeah. Well, okay, enough said. But I just remembered something. I bought a model of the Titanic, and me and Jillian in 2001, we went to Christina Lake, and Me and my ex-wife were playing basketball there, and we rented a cabin for a week, and we built the Titanic on our picnic table. And within a few days, we built the Titanic together, and she was 2001, so she was about 5 years old, and that's when I used to do my first models with my dad, the Batmobile and stuff. And so we finally got the Titanic done. And the neighbor said, "Is it sinking yet?" Oh, God. But anyways, I don't know where that model went. And that was before Jaden was born. It doesn't seem that long ago, really. But it was a nice week we spent at Christina Lake in BC, Canada. And we built the Titanic. I love watching my daughters grow up. I raised them while my ex was other places. Someday everybody's gonna sink. And maybe it's better to sink sooner than later. Everybody wants to die in their sleep. How about a nuclear bomb? Hey, Trump, just push the button. Hey, that would be a good way to go. No cancer suffering.